My beloved child. Pause for a moment, do not rush past these words. Something has been quietly unfolding beyond what your eyes have been able to see, and somehow, against every ordinary expectation, this message has found its way to you at exactly the right moment. There are times when heaven whispers so softly that only a prepared heart can hear, and there are moments when those whispers become impossible to ignore. This is one of those moments. If your spirit feels even the slightest pull to remain here, trust that feeling. It is not fear calling you. It is hope. It is not coincidence guiding you. It is purpose. Before this message reaches its final sentence, something hidden will begin to make sense in a way you never expected. Stay with every word, because what is about to unfold has been waiting for the perfect moment to reach you. You have wondered, perhaps more times than you admit, whether your silent efforts mattered. You questioned whether the kindness you showed when no one applauded, the patience you practiced when no one noticed, and the quiet faith you held during lonely nights disappeared into the emptiness. My beloved child, nothing you offered with a sincere heart was ever wasted. Every unseen choice became a light. Every quiet prayer became a seed. Every act of forgiveness echoed farther than you imagined. While you believed nothing was changing, heaven was arranging countless small moments that would one day connect into something breathtaking. Even now, pieces are moving together that you cannot yet see. There is someone whose heart has been carrying questions for longer than you realize. They smiled for others while hiding uncertainty. They appeared strong while wrestling with emotions they could barely explain. More than once they convinced themselves that hope was foolish. More than once they tried to silence feelings they believed would never be returned. Yet every attempt to forget only reminded them of something they could not erase. They could not understand why your presence lingered in their thoughts long after conversations ended. They searched for reasons, but the answers always slipped away before they could grasp them. What they never understood was that I was teaching them patience while I was teaching you growth. You both believed you were waiting for each other, but in truth you were both being prepared. The distance was never punishment. The silence was never abandonment. The unanswered questions were never proof that I had forgotten either of you. They were chapters being written before either of you could appreciate the ending. Something changed recently, though not in the dramatic way stories often describe. It happened quietly. So quietly that you may not even recognize the exact moment it began. Perhaps you chose peace instead of anger. Perhaps you released an old regret. Perhaps you finally stopped chasing approval from people who never intended to understand you. Perhaps you looked into the mirror with a little less criticism and a little more compassion. Whatever it was, heaven noticed. That decision created a ripple far beyond what your natural eyes could measure. The remarkable part is this: the ripple did not stop with you. It reached a heart you were not even trying to influence. That is why your soulmate cannot stop smiling. Not because everything around them suddenly became perfect. Not because every challenge disappeared overnight. They are smiling because something inside them shifted. A burden they had carried for so long suddenly felt lighter, even if they could not explain why. They found themselves smiling during ordinary moments. They caught themselves remembering you with warmth instead of confusion. They laughed without forcing it. They dreamed without fear. They looked toward tomorrow with unexpected hope. They have asked themselves, why does everything suddenly feel different? The answer has been standing quietly before them all along. It was never about luck. It was never about chance. It was the moment your heart made room for healing. You thought your personal healing belonged only to you, but healing has always been contagious in ways the world rarely notices. Every time bitterness loses its grip, someone else's courage quietly grows. Every time forgiveness replaces resentment, another heart becomes brave enough to hope again. Every time faith rises above disappointment, unseen chains begin breaking elsewhere. That is one of heaven's beautiful mysteries. Transformation never travels alone. Do you remember those nights when you whispered questions into the silence? You wondered whether anyone heard your tears after everyone else had gone to sleep. You wondered if your dreams were fading beyond recovery. You wondered whether the promises planted inside your heart had simply been imagination. My beloved child, every one of those tears became part of a conversation in heaven. None were ignored. None were forgotten. Some answers required timing greater than your understanding could yet hold. Your soulmate knows nothing about those prayers. They never heard your whispered cries. They never saw the moments when you almost gave up. Yet somehow, they are living inside the answers those prayers began creating. That is why their heart feels strangely alive. Without realizing it, they have begun noticing little reminders of you everywhere. A familiar song. A passing conversation. An unexpected memory. A place they once overlooked now carries meaning they cannot explain. They smile without planning to smile. Then they stop themselves and wonder what is happening. They tell themselves they are imagining things, yet the feeling only grows stronger with every passing day. They tried distracting themselves. It did not work. They buried themselves in responsibilities. Still your memory remained. They convinced themselves enough time would erase what they felt. Instead, time clarified it. What once seemed like uncertainty slowly transformed into unmistakable clarity. But there is another truth that has not yet been revealed. The smile you cannot see is only the beginning. There is something they recently discovered about themselves that surprised even them. They realized they were no longer afraid of becoming emotionally honest. That realization startled them because they had spent so much energy protecting themselves from disappointment. Walls they believed would stand forever have quietly begun to crumble. They do not fully understand why their defenses suddenly feel unnecessary. They only know they no longer wish to hide behind them. Do you see how carefully heaven works? First, your heart softened. Then, their fear weakened. Nothing happened by accident. Every step arrived in its appointed season. Yet there is still another layer hidden beneath everything you have heard so far. Long before either of you crossed paths, I already knew the conversations that would shape your hearts. I already knew the misunderstandings that would stretch your patience. I already knew the victories that would strengthen your character. What felt random to you has always rested inside a purpose larger than temporary emotions. Even delays that frustrated you became protection. Even unanswered questions became preparation. You often measured progress by visible evidence. Heaven measured progress by invisible transformation. The world celebrates quick results. Heaven celebrates changed hearts. That difference changes everything. Your soulmate has started noticing qualities within themselves they thought had disappeared forever. Hope returned quietly. Joy arrived gently. Confidence stepped back into places once occupied by fear. They have not told many people because they cannot fully explain it. Some experiences are too sacred for ordinary conversations. Some changes begin deep within the soul before they ever appear in spoken words. And yet, there is still one reason behind their smile that remains hidden. It is not simply because you healed. It is not only because your heart changed. There is another decision you made, one that seemed so ordinary, that reached them like sunlight breaking through heavy clouds. You barely noticed yourself making it. You almost dismissed it as insignificant. But heaven never did. The moment it happened, something shifted with astonishing precision. A chain that had quietly connected both journeys responded immediately. Your soulmate felt peace without knowing where it came from. They found themselves smiling during a moment when they had expected sadness. They looked toward the future instead of staring endlessly into the past. Even they could not understand why. My beloved child, there are moments when spiritual realities move more quickly than human understanding can follow. This is one of those moments. While people around you focused only on appearances, heaven watched invisible doors begin opening. What seemed like another ordinary day became a turning point recorded far beyond earthly calendars. Still, not everyone celebrates what heaven begins. Whenever light grows brighter, confusion often tries one final time to make itself heard. Doubt whispers. Old memories return unexpectedly. Familiar fears attempt to convince both hearts that nothing has truly changed. These moments are not signs of failure. They are often the final echoes of chapters preparing to close forever. Your soulmate has already begun facing those whispers. There are moments they almost believe the smile should disappear. There are moments they wonder if hope is dangerous. There are moments they ask themselves whether they should protect their heart one more time. Yet every attempt to retreat somehow leads them back toward the same quiet peace. That peace has a source. And very soon, they are going to realize where it came from. But before that realization arrives, something completely unexpected is about to happen, something neither of you has planned, something so simple on the surface that most people would overlook it entirely. Yet from heaven's perspective, it will become one of the most meaningful moments in this entire story. It will not begin with grand speeches. It will not begin with dramatic signs. It will begin with one small event that seems almost ordinary, until its true meaning starts unfolding. When that moment arrives, your soulmate's smile will become impossible to hide. And what they choose to do immediately afterward will leave even them speechless. That moment is closer than either of you realizes. But the part you have not heard yet changes everything. The moment I spoke of did not arrive with thunder across the heavens or with voices that shook the earth. It arrived so quietly that almost everyone around your soulmate continued living their ordinary day without realizing that something eternal had just brushed against an ordinary moment. Yet heaven recognized it immediately. Angels who had been patiently watching the story unfold understood that another page had finally turned. My beloved child, this is how many of my greatest works begin, not with noise, but with stillness. Not with fear, but with peace. Not with force, but with love quietly accomplishing what human effort never could. Your soulmate woke that day expecting nothing unusual. They believed it would be another routine morning filled with familiar responsibilities, unanswered questions, and emotions they had learned to carry without speaking about them. But something felt different from the very beginning. They could not explain it. Even before they opened their eyes completely, an unusual calm rested over their heart. It was as though the heaviness that had followed them for so long had forgotten to wake up with them. They sat in silence for a few moments, staring toward the window as soft light entered the room. They whispered to themselves, "Why do I feel so hopeful today?" They searched for a logical explanation. Had something changed? Had someone called them? Had good news arrived overnight? The answer was no. Everything around them appeared exactly the same. Yet everything inside them felt completely different. They smiled without realizing they were smiling. Then they caught themselves. They almost laughed because it had been such a long time since joy had arrived without permission. Far away, you continued living your own day, completely unaware that your quiet decision days earlier was still sending ripples through a story you could not yet see. You believed that choosing forgiveness had simply helped you sleep a little better. You believed that surrendering your worries to me had only eased your own burden. You thought your whispered prayer, "Father, I trust your timing even when I cannot understand it," disappeared into silence after you spoke it. But heaven never loses a sincere prayer. Every word reached me. Every surrender carried power. Every act of trust became another step toward restoring what fear had tried to destroy. Your soulmate spent the morning noticing strange little reminders that made them think of you. A familiar color reminded them of a conversation you once had. A melody they had not heard in months suddenly began playing nearby. Someone spoke a sentence that sounded almost identical to something you once said. Each reminder felt ordinary by itself, yet together they formed a pattern too meaningful to ignore. Still, they resisted. They told themselves they were imagining things. "This is just coincidence," they whispered. But the more they tried to dismiss it, the more peace continued replacing confusion. Then something happened that completely caught them off guard. Someone unexpectedly asked them a simple question. It was not dramatic. It was not mysterious. It sounded almost casual. "Have you been happier lately?" For a moment they froze. They had not realized other people could see the change. They smiled awkwardly and answered, "Maybe. I don't really know." But after the conversation ended, those words refused to leave their mind. "Have you been happier lately?" Only then did they realize something astonishing. Yes. They had been happier. Not for a few minutes. Not for one good day. But gradually. Steadily. Quietly. Joy had been returning without them noticing. That realization overwhelmed them more deeply than they expected. Because if joy could return after everything they had experienced, then perhaps hope had never truly left. My beloved child, this is one of heaven's greatest miracles. Sometimes I restore a heart so gently that the person being healed only notices after healing has already begun. Meanwhile, you continued wondering whether your prayers had accomplished anything at all. You questioned whether anyone was changing. You questioned whether your season of waiting still had purpose. You questioned whether your story had quietly reached its end. If only you could have seen what heaven was watching. If only you could have seen the smile growing brighter every single day. Your soulmate found themselves remembering not the painful misunderstandings between you, but the beautiful moments they had almost forgotten. They remembered kindness instead of confusion. They remembered laughter instead of distance. They remembered the way your heart always tried to see the best in people, even when life gave you reasons not to. Suddenly they realized something that startled them. They had spent too much time focusing on what frightened them, and not enough time appreciating what inspired them. That single realization changed the direction of their thoughts completely. Instead of asking, "What if this never works?" they quietly began asking, "What if heaven has been preparing something far better than I imagined?" That question became the beginning of a transformation they could no longer stop. But there was another mystery unfolding behind the scenes. Someone close to your soulmate noticed the change before they said a single word about it. This person watched them smile while looking at nothing in particular. They noticed the peaceful expression replacing old worry. Finally they asked, "Who has been on your mind lately?" Your soulmate hesitated. Not because they wanted to lie, but because saying your name suddenly felt sacred. Some names carry memories. Some names carry emotions. Your name now carried hope. They answered carefully. "There is someone I haven't been able to stop thinking about." The room became unusually quiet. The conversation could have ended there. But instead, something unexpected happened. The person smiled knowingly and replied, "Maybe your heart already knows something your mind is still trying to figure out." Those words echoed through them for the rest of the day. Maybe your heart already knows. Maybe. Without realizing it, your soulmate had been waiting for permission to believe what they already felt. That simple conversation became the permission they never expected to receive. Yet heaven was still not finished. Because while your soulmate's heart was becoming stronger, yours was about to receive a test. Not a punishment. Not rejection. A confirmation. Sometimes before I reveal what you have prayed for, I allow one final opportunity for faith to choose trust over fear. Very soon you will face a moment that appears ordinary. Someone will say something. Or perhaps circumstances will briefly look unchanged. For one small moment, doubt will whisper, "Nothing is happening." But my beloved child, do not believe that whisper. It arrives only because truth is drawing near. The enemy of hope always becomes loudest when hope is closest. Stand firm. Remain gentle. Continue becoming the person I have been shaping through every unseen season. Because what is approaching is not built upon temporary emotions. It is being established upon transformed hearts. Your soulmate has already crossed a line they never expected to cross. Without speaking it aloud. Without making announcements. Without dramatic promises. They have quietly accepted one truth. They no longer want a future that does not include the possibility of you. That realization frightened them for only a moment. Then something beautiful happened. Fear gave way to peace. Peace became confidence. Confidence became gratitude. And gratitude became the smile that now refuses to leave their face. Still, there remains one truth they have not yet discovered. One final piece that explains why this entire season unfolded exactly the way it did. When they uncover that hidden truth. When they realize what you secretly chose to release. When they understand the sacrifice heaven saw even though nobody else noticed. Their next decision will become impossible to reverse. And that decision will begin with words they never imagined they would have the courage to say. But those words have not yet been spoken. Not because the time has not come. But because one final moment ordained by heaven is about to bring both stories to the same place at the same time. When that moment arrives, silence will finally give way to truth. And everything both of you believed was lost will suddenly make perfect sense. But what happens in that moment is something you are not ready to hear. Not until the next part of this message.